My name is Amalia Weber. I'm the program specialist here at Rochester Hills Public Library, and I'd like to welcome you to this evening's program, From Sap to Syrup with Dinosaur Hill. Before we get started, I'd like to take care of a few housekeeping details. Firstly, tonight's program will be recorded and available to view about 1 week from tonight on our YouTube page and on the RHPL website shortly after. We ask that audience members please silence or turn off their cell phones before we begin in order to avoid any disturbances during the presentation. Even if you feel like your phone is off, it's never a bad idea to check. The 9th annual Friends of RHPL Wine, Wit, and Wisdom fundraiser takes place Saturday, April 26th from 6 to 9:30 p.m. Attendees can choose from presentations on coffee, local history and culture, space exploration, and forensics, and enjoy a buffet dinner and drinks, wine, beer, and soft drinks, a silent auction, and a 50-50 raffle. Tickets are $80 or $90 after April 14th and can be purchased online at rhpl.org/friends or in person beginning on March 1st. Registration forms may be picked up at the circulation desk and can be dropped off into the Wine, Wit, and Wisdom box on the circulation desk, along with a check made out to Friends of the RHPL. We would like to thank the Friends of the RHPL for funding this particular presentation, and we would like to thank them for all of the fundraising that they do that helps us fund presentations like these. Our next program is Women's Health, Healthy Transitions with Henry Ford Health, which will be an in-person event on Tuesday, March 11th at 7 p.m. You can sign up for that at calendar.rhpl.org. Now, without further ado, please welcome our presenter, Amanda Felk.
All right, so we are talking about sap to syrup today, and basically my slideshow is just pictures, because I yammer on enough without it. All right, so let's get started. To start with, the sugar maple is the maple tree that's most often tapped for syrup. And so if we look at this picture here, we've got the United States. I didn't add Canada because, yes, they make maple syrup too, but Michigan maple syrup is clearly the best, right? Yes. So if we look at this kind of white color here that's got the little pepper marks on it, that is the range of the sugar maple, the native range of the sugar maple tree that has the highest concentration of sugar of any maple tree. So like I was saying earlier to the early arrivals, you can tap any maple tree and it's fine. The sugar maple is the one that has the most amount of sugar in the sap. And so then we have overlaid the green. So everywhere there's sugar maples does not mean that everywhere there's sugar maples you can make maple syrup. But what? But you just need maple sap to make syrup? Well, you also need the right conditions to get the sap out of the tree. And so in this green section here, you'll notice it's a little bit further north of just the range of the maple tree, right? So in this condition, we have days where we have freezing nights and warm days. And this is what allows the sap to run through the tree. And this is our harbinger of spring. This means that spring is going to happen, right? So usually, this year is a little wonky. I say that more and more, but sometimes it's wonky in the other direction. This year, I usually say, for a general rule, here in Michigan, if you want to tap your maple trees, you start tapping on Valentine's Day, and then the season's over on Pi Day, March 14th. So it's 1 month where you collect the sap. It's easy for me to remember because I like holidays, right? And especially ones, you go from the chocolate to the pie, right? And you're collecting the sweet stuff all in between, right? That's the way my brain thinks. So what we have is at night, we have freezing temperatures. And so that allows for that sap from down at the roots of the tree. So the sap, what is it? Well, sap has two things in it when it starts out at this time of year. It has sugar. That is the food that the tree makes for itself all spring and summer and part of the fall long. and that sugar goes to where the tree is growing. So in the springtime, where is it growing? Up at the top. It's got to grow leaves, right? In the wintertime, where is it growing? Underground, where we can't see it. The roots are growing deeper. And so in order to move through the tree, the sugar picks up some of the water from the roots. And so it mixes together, and that sugar water is what we call sap. It can also have some nutrients from the soil in it, and that's why maple syrup actually has, it's a little bit better for you than most other, sweet things like honey and cane sugar, beet sugar. It's got some B vitamins and some other good nutrients in it. And so what happens is that sap goes up the tree, freeze, and then we have a thaw, and that sap comes down the tree again, and that's when we can put a little hole in the tree and take a little bit out for ourselves, right? Very cool. All right. So in our tree, we've got a little cross section here. We take our tool, and we make a hole in the tree. Now, the first people who ever did that were the Native Americans, both from our area, which is several of the Anishinaabe, the Ojibwe, Ottawa, and Potawatomi, and over in Vermont and Connecticut, which are also kind of known for maple syrup somehow, they used birch bark baskets like this one to collect their sap. Theirs would not have a hole in it, but this one has seen many, many, many more small children than any of theirs did, right? And so they would make a series of zigzags in the tree for about 2 or 3 feet down the trunk, and it would end at the birch bark basket to help corral the sap down in there. And so then when European settlers came over, they brought over some more metal tools, right? And so they started drilling a hole with this very technologically advanced tool, and they would make a hole, but they didn't have a lot of metal, so they would carve a spile, right? So they would carve this out of some other poor tree that is not a maple, and it's basically like a little faucet or a little straw that kind of directs the sap into a bucket. And then they would use a little wooden mallet and pound it into the tree. Right in there. There. All three at once. And then as metal became more plentiful and more available, they kind of went a little bit crazy on all of the different types of spiles that started coming out. Some spiles would have a little hook so you could hang your metal pail on it and it would drip into your metal pail. Some of the pails have little metal covers to keep ants and squirrels and all that kind of stuff out. But there's just a couple of different kinds of spiles in the bucket. We can pass that around as well. Check those out. And then we come to today, where a lot of people still use the metal spiles in the pails system, right? But what we have, well, we have these. This is a brace and bit, so we brace this against the tree, and then the bits are interchangeable for different sizes, and we can turn that to drill the hole in the tree. Some people do use power drills. I like this because you only want to go so far. And if I have a power drill, I am far more likely to just keep going, right? And then we use, well, as a naturalist, it kind of pains me to say, but we use a plastic spile, right? So a plastic spile, and then Mr. Hammer, and then we'll tap that into our tree. And at Dinosaur Hill, what we use is a food grade bucket that once held chocolate frosting with a lid. I didn't bring the lid today, but the lid has a hole drilled in it, and that hole is just big enough for a plastic tubing to go inside. And then we hang this I do not use the spiles with the hooks because if it gets heavy, it takes your spile out of the tree. So what I do is I use twine and I throw it up over a branch and catch it and tie the handle of my bucket onto the tree in a different location and then just put my tubing into the bucket. Yes, I do. Yeah, I usually tap about 5 trees a year. There are right now, as of Sunday. So as I was saying a little bit earlier, this year is a little bit wonky. We had cold days and cold nights, which does not make sap run at all. And so I didn't get a chance to tap our trees until Sunday. And yesterday and today we got a little bit of sap, right? Because we just started getting some Pardon me?
If I go in the park in the morning tomorrow.
Yeah, absolutely. They're right in front of the nature center because I'm also lazy and don't like to carry full buckets of sap for very long in the forest. So our tree, when we are drilling and tapping into our tree, this is a portion of a tree, right? So this is the outside part. This is the part that we always see, right? What's that called? The bark. Woof, woof. All right, so we've got the bark as the outside of the tree. And then right inside the tree, we have the cambium layer, and that's going to be the layer that's where the new bark is being built, right? And then a little bit further, we have the sapwood, which is the new growth of the tree. And then in the very inside, we have the heartwood. And heartwood is the old growth of the tree that's been there for years. So between these four, the heartwood, the sapwood, the cambium, and the bark, where do you think the sap is? Sapwood, yes, it's not a trick question, awesome. All right, so some people overthink it. All right, so we want to go in just far enough that we pass the cambium layer and we're into the sapwood. If we drill too far into the heartwood, we will not get sap. If we only go into the cambium, we will not get sap. If we only cut the bark, we will not get sap. It's got to be right into the sapwood. So how I do that is by putting a little bit of masking tape. This is again why I use the brace and bit. I put a little bit of masking tape at 2 inches. If I've gone 2 inches, I've gone too far, right? That's just my personal tip. Yeah, each tree is a little bit different, but there's a little bit of wiggle room. So like I know that 2 inches is going to be too far on any tree, right? If I drill, usually while you're drilling, you'll start to see, if it's a warm day, you'll see some liquid come out, right, when you first get to it. And you can go just a little bit further than that and then pound your spile in with the hammer. All right. So then we need a maple tree, right? So what are some ways that we tell one type of tree from another type of tree? There's a big hint up there. The leaves, yes, absolutely. That's a great way to tell. Maple leaves all have these kind of points. They have usually 5 main points. A few of them have 3. And they have the same kind of shape, right? They have what's called a palmate shape, so that they all meet at the middle and they have like the 5 points. But when it's freezing at night and warm during the day, they don't have any leaves, right? So what else might we look at? Well, we could look at their seeds. Maple seeds all have, they're all called, there's a special word for them, right? So maple seeds are called samaras. So they have that kind of, the little seed part is right here, right? And then they have this little fan on them that helps them become dispersed by the wind. And we've all seen this. A lot of us might know them not as samaras, but as helicopters, right? Yeah. Anyone here not play with helicopter seeds? Yeah. So they are a little bit different depending on what species of maple you're looking at. But alas, during the end of winter and the beginning of spring, do they have their seeds? No. Ideally, all their seeds are in the ground waiting to plant new trees, right? So then we have something else. We have the buds on the tree will definitely tell us what kind of tree it is. But if we are tapping our trees for maple sap, as soon as we see buds, we stop. We pull all of our taps out. Because if you see buds, those buds are using a growth hormone in order to grow. And that growth hormone tastes bitter. Do we want our maple syrup to be bitter? No. So we don't use that sap. Right? So again, they're not going to show up until we don't want to tap that tree anymore. Right? So, all right, this is the fun part. Anyone who wants to can stand up. We got a little calisthenics in today. Right. Move away from your neighbors enough that you can go like this. Right. So, this is what we call opposite branching. If I am a tree, I have one branch on this side, and then right across, I have another branch on this side. This is what we call alternate branching. If I have a branch on this side, I have absolutely nothing over here. If I have a branch on this side, I have absolutely nothing over here. There are only a few trees in Michigan. There are about 70 types of trees altogether that are native to Michigan that we expect to find here. Some are naturalized. But of them, of those 70 trees, there are 8 that are going to have opposite branching. They will be 5 different types of maple. They will be ash trees, which we won't see very often because of the emerald ash borer, unfortunately. They will be dogwood trees, which are usually not quite as tall as a maple would be. And they are horse chestnut trees. And the horse chestnut, it grows, the trunks kind of grow out, right? It's not one base trunk, right? So, every other tree in Michigan, besides those 8, is going to have alternate branching. So here's our tree quiz. I'm going to name a tree. Show me if you think it has alternate or opposite branching. Ready? Silver maple. Opposite. Good job. All right. Eastern cottonwood. Alternate branching. All right. Good job. All right. How about an American elm? Still alternate. A red maple. Opposite. All right. Now here's the tricky one. Box elder. Would anyone change their mind if I said that another name for box elder is an ash leaf maple? Ah, all right, you can go ahead and sit down. Thanks for being such good sports. So like I said, a lot of times we use these plastic tubing that we passed around, and what we do at Dinosaur Hill is we just put it in a bucket because our maple trees are not really right next to each other. But what you'll see in commercial operations very often is they can do the whole forest with just a series of knots, and it makes it look like one of those laser games where you have to, Mission Impossible or whatever. And they collect it all in big tanks, usually bigger than this one. Like some of them will have a little shed with a big 55-gallon drum, and all the sap just goes running in there. To me, that's an awful lot of engineering. And this guy, he apparently just does like a section at a time and takes his little RTV out there. And then once we've got all this sap, we've collected, say we've collected 2 of this big bin, right? 2 of these, picture them together, filled to the tippity top with sap. How much syrup are we going to make? 1 gallon. And that's if we tap only sugar maples. It takes 40 gallons of sugar maple sap in order to make 1 gallon of sugar maple syrup. Right? So if we use the other types of maple trees, something like a silver maple or that box elder or red maple, then it'll take more like 60 gallons. So we'd have to add a whole nother tub of this to get that same 1 gallon of maple syrup. At Dinosaur Hill, I do this, right? I don't mind tapping a different type of maple, because here's my secret. Norway maples are not native to Michigan. And they were planted along all of the streets, right? Because they grow nice and straight, and I don't know why. They got a good deal on them, something like that, right? And so they're a very common street tree. And in fact, at Dinosaur Hill, we have 4 Norway maples that are right in front of the building. And I tap them all every single year. Because tapping the tree doesn't really hurt the tree, right? But there's always a chance that if you stress it out too much, it could damage the tree, it could get sick. And I don't mind doing that to Norway maples. So I will boil extra just so that I'm not hurting my favorite sugar maple tree. Because there's only one that I know is a complete sugar maple tree. So it's my favorite, and I don't tap it every year. I'm very gentle with it.
Do all maple taste same?
It does all taste the same. I did, about 2 years ago, I did an experiment. I tapped a silver maple, a Norway maple, a box elder, a red maple, and the sugar maple, and I took 1 gallon of sap from each of those trees and kept it separate, and I boiled it down and got a tablespoon of syrup, and I personally could not taste a difference. So I'll say, at least to me, they don't taste any different. Right? It's just a matter of timing.
The only special thing with sugar maple is that you have to tap less.
Right. The big difference is it's a commercial tree, right? It's like you don't have to collect as much sap, right? It's a little bit less work. So what we do to make that sap, Miss Margaret, do you want to bring our sap around so everyone can taste some? All right. So we've got a little bit of sap. You guys are lucky. We were able to get 1 pitcher full of sap out from yesterday and today. And so the sap, again, is that sugar water. And so when you see it, it's really not what you're going to put on your pancakes, right? I mean, just the idea of sugar water. Are you going to pour that on your pancakes or your waffles? Yeah? Ooh. So when I do mapping programs, I need you to remember that you never eat soggy waffles. All right. So our sap, when it comes out of the tree, this is what it looks like, and this is what it tastes like. The worst thing it could possibly taste like is water. The best thing it could taste like is sugar, right? And sugar and water. And so it does not look like syrup at all. How many of you want to say, Miss Amanda, you are tricking us. This is just water. What are you even saying? Right? And so, this, we have to take water out of it in order to make syrup. And the best way to take the water out is to heat it up, right? Because we want to take the water away, but leave the sugar, because that's the part that tastes good. And so what you can do is, these are evaporators. So what we do is put a fire down below. I feel like there's a song or something about a fire down below. So there's a fire that goes on down below, and then there's a very shallow pan. And we boil it, and boil it, and boil it. One of these evaporators, the cheapest one for a little tiny tray like that, maybe a 4 foot by 2 foot or something like that, goes for around $2,000. For something you're going to use once a year. What I do at Dinosaur Hill, and Miss Margaret helps me, she's one of our #1 fire attenders. So what we do is we build a fire, and we have cinder blocks, and we put sheet pans across those cinder blocks. And so we just keep pouring more sap in, and stirring, and keeping the fire hot. And we do that for about 8 or 10 or 12 hours when we have about 40 gallons of sap. And then when we get it to a thin syrup, that's usually when Miss Margaret will take it into her house. Well, not her house, outside her house, because again, all that steam, she doesn't want her wallpaper to peel. So she'll take it home with her, but on her back porch, she'll put it on a little hot plate and finish it off that way, right? And then we take our filters. So you just use a thick cloth. This is felt, but I think we use cotton usually. And we'll put that into, a strainer. This happens to be from a coffee pot. And it's just something that holds that cloth in. Oops. And then the syrup passes through our filters, and we put that into mason jars. And this takes out any little bits of ash from the fire and any insects that might have found their way in as we were doing open air fire. And we use mason jars. Right? So this is a sample. Well, this is the jar, right, that your sample of Dinosaur Hill maple syrup came out of. And you'll notice that there's this big chunk here in the bottom. So we made it a very dark, robust syrup when we did this jar. And so some of the sugar settled down to the bottom. So this is basically a giant clump of rock candy, right? But again, with those B minerals, all that good stuff. Yeah. Yes. Yeah, it's just candy. Sometimes some sediments will just be sediment that's in it, like if it wasn't filtered thoroughly. But when it's a big lump like that, then that's just the sugar. It's just a little overdone. Yes. All right.
It's the natural sugar, not the cane sugar dissolved.
Yeah, it's the sugars from the sap, right? So another thing that you can get is you can continue to cook down your syrup, and you have to stir it a lot or else it burns. But you can get it to be just like sugar bits, right? You can buy this in the store too. Obviously, I didn't make this packaging. But this is how like Native Americans and the early settlers would have preferred. They would have taken it, instead of it being syrup, they would want it to be more travelable, right? So something that you could store, because this sugar has a lot of energy in it, doesn't it? When we have sugar, do we have energy? Yeah, until we have too much and then we fall asleep. But sugar, right? We have a sugar rush, yeah. So this was a very high energy food if you didn't know where your next meal was coming from, right? If you have to work really, really hard for every single meal that you get, you can't just go to the grocery store, then this was something really cool to have on hand, because you're like, oh man, I don't have anything to eat today, but I do have some of this stored. Well then, they even sell it now today. They've decided to start selling like maple sugar energy drinks. Like they sell sap in a Tetra Pak at the health food store, and you can have it as a natural energy drink. See, I saved you guys so much money on your sample today, didn't I? Yes. Yes, yes. So we boil that sap for hours. Yes, ma'am. Right, that's a good question, and it's completely dependent on the weather. So like I said, we tapped on Sunday, and yesterday was about 40, so we got about maybe a half gallon per tree, right? Today was a little bit warmer. I think we got up to 50, and we got another half gallon or so. If we had a 60-degree day, but then a freezing night, we would get a full gallon per tree. Yeah, so you just leave it tapped the entire season. So as soon as you put a spile in the tree, you just keep it there until spring, until you see the buds. Yeah. Why is it not more expensive? Because at the store, usually what we have is commercial operations where they're not doing as much work. They just keep their trees with that spider web of rubber tubing. They don't have to go collect it every day. It's all being put in that place. They have the evaporators, so they're just a plug-in evaporator. They don't necessarily have a fire. They spend the big bucks to get the equipment. They have the $10,000 evaporators where they can just put 60 gallons in, and at the end of the day they have the syrup, right? Because that's where their money is. Now, a little bit of trivia for you when I'm telling you that Michigan has the best maple syrup is that we actually have more trees, more maple trees, than any other state, including Vermont. And the reason that Vermont surpassed us in commercial maple syrup groves is because we got sidetracked by going into cars. It's the only reason they surpassed us, right? All right. So, oh, I forgot this one. So there is one other way that we can tell different trees apart that I didn't mention, is that's by the bark. It's taken me about 20 years, and now I can tell trees apart by their bark. Because here in Michigan, most of our trees kind of have this grayish-brown bark, but that's a sugar maple. Yes?
Where can I get this material from?
Oh, that's a good question. There's quite a lot of places where you can get different things to different spiles or whatever if you want to tap your own trees. If you have a maple tree at home, you can just get a little starter set from Amazon. It's usually the easiest one. But there are some maple syrup places. We've got some brochures over on the side here. Once we're done, if you'd like to pick one of those up, just about everyone has a website now too. So one other thing, got to address the elephant in the room. So I've got this. Is this maple syrup? No, they are legally obligated to not have the word maple anywhere on this bottle. This is pancake syrup. Not in the picture, just in here. This is made from a completely different plant. It can be called pancake syrup or table syrup. What this is high fructose corn syrup, water, salt, cellulose, gum, caramel color, natural flavor, sodium hexametaphosphate, sorbic acid, and sodium benzoate. And so that sorbic acid and sodium benzoate, those are what allows you to not have to refrigerate this. True maple syrup has to be refrigerated once it's open. It can stay in a sealed mason jar like this one for over a year, right? Very easily. If it's open in your fridge in a mason jar like this, it usually stays for about 6 months, if you can go 6 months without finishing it off. You're not making enough pancakes if you do that. And the sap itself can stay refrigerated for a week, frozen for up to 6 months. So if you don't feel like boiling it now, you can always have a summer bonfire and boil your sap. All right, so this stuff, now we have our sneaky quiz. We have some samples for you. We have a sample of corn syrup, and we have a sample of store-bought maple syrup, the good stuff. But we're not going to tell you which one's which. So we're going to give everyone sample A and sample B, and we want to see if you can tell them apart. Yes? Oh. Usually, each maple tree, again, it's really going to depend on weather. If you've got the perfect temperatures, then you're going to get a gallon of sap per day per tree. No matter what type of tree it is, what type of maple tree it is, it's going to give you a gallon of sap. Not all of those, depending on species, is going to give you the right concentration, right? So the concentration of sap in a sugar maple is about 4% sugar. For like a Norway maple, it's closer to 2%. I'm sorry, the maples? We do not sell the maple syrup. I only tap enough trees so that we can support our programs. So we're going to do the taste test with the store-bought syrup and the corn syrup. But then, if you'd like, we also have samples of the Dinosaur Hill, and you can taste kind of like what the smoky flavor that doing it over a campfire kind of puts on. We do not do a pancake breakfast. We do our maple program is pretty much this, but also with the fire and going out and looking at the maple trees. Yes? I don't know based on color, but I would guess probably a box elder has more color variation in the leaves. To me, that's just what I've seen, but I can't tell you for sure. If you happen to have a picture of the bark, I could. No. Okay.
So that big chunk of the tree, that was a sugar maple.
This one in particular, I think this one is actually a pine, but this is the tree cookie that I had. They all have the same shapes, the same layers, right? So they have,
I'm interested.
oh, this bark was not, the little guy here is. So this is from a younger sugar maple. When they get,
Smooth one.
mostly, when they get a little bit older and a little bit longer,
So I've got
bigger
a
around,
maple.
they're gonna start having more of this like peanut butter color between the bark. It'll start to crack a little bit as it gets bigger around. And you'll see, for a sugar maple, you'll see like this color start to show up. It'll still be fairly smooth, but it's
So
just
it
got like a
doesn't
few
have bark
cracks.
that you can like peel off,
No.
like that big chunk you have there.
Yeah, it's not like that. Yep.
But it is a maple.
Is there anything,
That one is not a maple. That one's just a pine. I was just showing the different layers.
does anything like a pine maple or some other type of tree syrup exist?
Yes.
Pine syrup?
You would not want to eat the sap out of, or a syrup from a pine tree. That would not be good. That's not an edible one. But there are birch trees that you can tap, and I've heard, I haven't experienced it myself, but I've heard that they taste a little bit like butterscotch. And black walnut trees as well, you can tap. Again, I haven't tried it myself, but I really want to. So if anyone has a black walnut or a birch tree they want me to tap, just email me, right? Let me know. I'll do all the work. You can get a teaspoon of syrup. It'll be great. Yes. All right. So let's see. Everyone got a chance to try sample A and sample B? Yeah. All right, let's do a show of hands. Who thinks sample A is the real maple syrup? Oh, not very many of us. All right, hands down. Who thinks sample B is the real maple syrup? Almost all of us. Miss Margaret, I don't even know. Miss Margaret, was A or B the real stuff? Oh, you guys did really well. Most of my groups end up thinking that the corn syrup's the real stuff. Good job. Round of applause.
Was B your maple syrup?
No. We did store-bought for the test, and now we have our maple syrup coming around. Okay, so there are also different grades of maple syrup, and our store-bought maple syrup is the amber grade because we use that for the taste test. It makes it a little easier for us to tell it apart because it's different colors. And it gives a little something extra during field trips, right, that the kids can tell the colors apart too. So our maple syrup is, again, done over a campfire, and we do it for quite some time. So this particular batch was a very robust one. That's how we can, like I said, we had a high concentration of sugar. That's how we got the rock candy at the bottom that I've been waiting for about a year to get down to the candy so I can eat it. So thank you all. Yeah. Awesome.
After evaporation, no water is it's only sap.
Well, yeah, there's no additional water. It's just the sap, which is water and sugar, and there is some water left behind. We just take a lot of it out.
So you keep stirring during the evaporation process?
We don't stir until it's already to almost syrup. So when it's thick enough that it coats the back of the spoon, then we'll start to stir it a little bit more. It takes about a good 6 hours to get to that point.
So only water evaporation, no sugar.
All the water evaporates, well, not all of it, but yeah, the water's evaporating and leaving the sugar behind. And like I said, if we do continue to do it, we can take all of the water out and end up with this, right? This is just taking every little bit of water out, and it looks just the same. Excellent. All right. I think I forgot to mention, when we do tap trees, usually we make sure that we're tapping ones that are big enough that we can hug. So they need to be 10 inches in diameter. Yeah, and that's how we do it. So thank you.
What was the store-bought maple syrup? Where was that?
The store-bought maple syrup, it's the Kroger brand one. It's the amber grade. Yeah. So the one that we did is a little bit darker and more robust. And personally, my favorite. I really like the smoke flavor. Did anyone taste the smoke flavor in the Dinosaur Hill stuff? Yeah. That's my favorite part of it. It's like, campfire. Sometimes Margaret says, oh, we should get an evaporator. And I'm like, but then we don't have a campfire. Yeah, awesome. Well, thank you so much. We do also have a hard candy to go for each of you. So thank you very much for coming tonight. I hope you had a good time.